Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers, and this is.
Octavia Graves, how you doing?
Oh my gosh, it's not Pato this week, you guys. I know you're devastated, but we do have a guest, so that's wonderful. Um, Octavian, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Ashley. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's super exciting to have you here. I've been on your show, and we're kind of gonna get into who you are and what you do and all that fun stuff. But first, why don't we go ahead and talk about what's happening in the world of the weird, strange, and unusual.
Okay,
Um,
good.
I didn't really have any Fortean news this week, but I did have something that I wanted to bring up because it is very near and dear to my heart. um, there, okay, so back in March of 2019. I started following this missing persons case. All right. And this missing person was an 8-month-old baby. All right.
Okay.
And so, as the story goes with the 8-month-old baby, the mother had her boyfriend drop the baby off to the babysitter, and the baby was never seen or heard from ever again. She reported the baby missing. It took her a week to report the baby missing, and it's just a whole shit show, right? 8-month-old babies, they can't do anything hardly, so it's pretty unlikely that the baby ran away. uh
Yeah.
so it's been crazy. And then, like, within like 2 months of the baby missing, like, the mom is like pregnant again, and still nobody knows where the baby is. So yeah, this happened back in 2019. The baby's name is Amaya Robertson, and it's a case that I kind of wanted to cover on the show itself because you have these cases where fucking entire children go missing and nobody's held accountable for it. The mother wasn't arrested, the boyfriend wasn't arrested.
Was there
They
like an
didn't.
investigation
Oh,
attached to it?
absolutely. But there's no evidence that there was any foul play amongst the mother and the boyfriend or the babysitter. Even the babysitter was named; everybody knew who she was, and they couldn't really peg anything. During one of these investigations, you can't just arrest somebody. Like, you have
Right.
to have
Yeah.
evidence. And even though common sense says clearly there was some conspiring going on amongst the boyfriend and the lady, and the mother, um, that's it. I mean, it's just a gut feeling. It's just common sense, but there isn't anything to hold them accountable. So it's kind of just one of these. Again, this happens a lot. We're all familiar with, like, the Casey Anthony and how she walked
Yeah,
and
of course.
wasn't charged with anything is devastating. And everybody's like, how does that happen? Well, it happens all the time. So I kind of wanted to bring light to the case originally because, first of all, it's ridiculous that it's been 3.5 years and nothing had ever come of it. But also, just to kind of shed light on the fact that people just go fucking missing. People, children, elderly people, men, women, people just go missing, and
Yeah.
nothing ever comes of it ever again. But there, I might not have to do an episode on it. Or at least not that case anyway, because yesterday it was reported that the mother was arrested and
Oh,
is
okay.
being charged not with murder, but she's being charged with basically neglect. What the charges are is basically neglect leading to the death of this child. Because they did rule it a homicide, even though there's no body. They suspect that clearly the baby's probably dead. Um, but yeah, she's been arrested. The boyfriend's also now got a warrant out for his arrest. So there's been movement on the case. So even though the case is 3.5 years old and there didn't really seem to be any light at the end of the tunnel, there very well could be. So that is, I mean, it's as exciting, as it can be for a case of a missing baby. But
Well, I wonder what her history is like and if she has any kind of abuse in her history as far as her, abusing children or anything like that. If there's any kind of history with this.
she's definitely a very hot mess. No, so she had an older child, who was taken initially. So she had two children. The baby went missing. The older child was taken, but she had regained custody back of him. Like I said, went and had another baby, and then went to go have yet another baby, and she's pregnant with her third. So for every year that her one baby has been missing, she's just continued to have a new one. And there's lots of drugs and just very dysfunctional background involved. But we don't know the whole story yet. The hope is that now that she is in jail, she might start talking.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see what happens. But I just, like I said, kind of wanted to bring that up because it just was important to me. So it was a victory to me.
What state was it in?
This is Indiana.
Okay.
So there's lots of speculation. Did she sell the baby? Did she did they kill the baby? Did he kill the baby? Who killed the baby? Where is the baby?
Yeah, I mean, there's
One.
a lot of questions. I mean, like, who is the babysitter? What is their record? What is their history?
Well, and
Are they actually a babysitter? Do they have a history of being a babysitter?
so the babysitter was real. There was so much drama like spread with this. Let me tell you something. True crime Facebook groups are off the motherfucking chain, and these people know exactly what's going on before the police do.
Yeah, I remember
um,
when the what
Go
was it
ahead.
Making a Murderer, that
Oh
Stephen
yeah,
Avery case, like the Reddit was so much more informative than the
yeah.
actual show.
Yeah. And that's how these things go. And me being somebody that's into these topics, I mean, I follow true crime pretty closely, and I've watched things. One of the more famous, more recent cases, the Chris Watts case. I mean, I watched that from day one. And so I watch these cases, and I'll tell you, a lot of them end up unsolved. I mean, you never get any type of closure on any of it. And it's crazy because these people absolutely dig into these people's lives. And as nuts as it sounds, I mean, you really get to know them personally. So it's
Yeah,
pretty.
what case that I was always really interested in was the woman who was murdered by her boyfriend when they were on van life like tour. Do you remember
Yeah.
that? Did
The
they ever find
Gabby,
him? I
yeah.
know that he kind of ran away into the Everglades, but I don't remember hearing like the conclusion to that.
Yes, he ran away. He killed himself in the woods.
Ah, okay.
He killed himself in the woods, and they found they found like a notebook where he had written like a suicide letter saying that he did kill her, he strangled her. And but first he had said that she had gotten very sick with some type of infection. Um and then he pretty much made it sound like he put her out of her misery. But that's it. I mean, now he's dead, so we can't question about
Yeah. His
the
mother was involved in
details.
that too, right?
What's that?
His mother? There was a whole thing about his mother kind of like hiding him or something like that.
Well, people didn't know. People were harassing his. He was supposed to have gone back home to his family, his parents' house, and he had left their house, and nobody could find him. He was on the run, and even though he wasn't being held or anything, he was just a suspect. He just fucking disappeared, and people kind of speculated that the parents were hiding him. Um,
Okay.
so they would like leave, the parents would leave, and people would like nitpick like the size of their bags and like things that they're like, there's something in there.
Yeah.
Which of course I at this point I do believe that they were all wrong. I think that I don't know. I doubt his parents knew that he was going to go commit suicide. It'd be pretty fucked up to encourage a child to do that, even if they are guilty of murder. But who knows? So, but that was another big one on social media. That people follow. And so, get into them. If you're into the true crime thing, start digging into some of these cases and kind of watch how they progress. You learn a lot from a legal standpoint how these things work. One of the big fun things that had happened with Chris Watts' case is that after he had pled guilty, he took a plea deal, pled guilty, and they released what's called the discovery. So when you have a big case, or any case at all, you have what's called a discovery, and it's a file of the investigation. It's basically a timeline and a step by step and the evidence breakdown, and it's shit that you couldn't even imagine, you wouldn't have even thought of as a regular person to have gotten access to. And a lot of people had kind of just discovered that this was something that existed. I mean, there is a case file, and you have access as a citizen once that case file, once the trial is over, once charges, are done and over with, you have access to all of that information for any case that you could imagine. So it's pretty neat, pretty cool stuff. So
Yeah, I know
anyway,
that
well,
in Maryland, there's been a lot of controversy about cases in Baltimore. The discovery files either just go up missing, or they don't make it accessible to the public for like a really long time, and that's just because of how incompetent our police force is in the city. But
oh
that was
yeah.
a big deal for a number of cases, actually.
That's not a good thing at all. Well, I mean, discoveries should be made available, so that way the attorney of who's being, charged can get access to it and appeal. So,
Right,
um,
absolutely.
that's one thing. And then just as far as like public access go, I mean, do we really need to know all of the details of a case? I guess not. No, we're not owed that at all. But it's kind of cool. I
Yeah,
like
I
to
think
have
so.
access. Yeah, it's neat. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with this missing baby. I'm hoping that there's some justice served. I mean, I get the baby's probably dead. But at the same time, 3.5 years and someone's finally being held accountable for it. That's pretty amazing. So we'll continue to watch that. But in not so depressing news about dead and missing babies, let me switch gears on you a bit. This weekend's the Mothman Festival.
I know. I'm really bummed. I was planning on going, and then I realized I'm going to be with Timothy Renner at the Transcendence Conference in Scranton, Pennsylvania. But
Oh,
I really need to go to Mothman Festival, especially like next year or something like that.
absolutely, you do. It is going to be fucking phenomenal. They haven't had it since 2019, which was my first Mothman festival that I ever went to.
Okay.
And it was before who I am now. As a matter of fact, it is my anniversary of me taking on this job full time. So that was the pivotal moment. That Mothman Festival weekend was what fucking absolutely changed my entire life. So very neat. It'll be cool to actually see the festival itself, knowing what I know now and knowing the people that I know now, because I didn't know. I saw all these people that I've met over the past 3 years. You know, I probably saw every single one of them in 2019 and had no idea who they are. And that's just kind of a crazy, um, stoner thought, I guess. So, but I will be there. I will be at the Mothman Festival. I am not vending. I don't know if I ever will, if I'm perfectly honest with you. It is a huge event. It is one of the biggest type of these events out there. Unless I am able to hire a whole bunch of people to hang out at my table all day long, it's just very overwhelming. But I will physically be there. It means that I have more time to talk to all of you. Don't be afraid to approach me. I'm not very good at approaching people that I only know online, but I'm very easily recognizable with my bright red hair. So don't be shy. So there's that. What else is coming up? Oh, October the 1st. I will be speaking and vending at Mysticon at the Ravenswood Library in Ravenswood, West Virginia. So definitely come and check that out.
I will definitely be there.
Are you going to be there?
Yeah, I didn't even know about it, but since it's in West Virginia, that's only a couple hours from me. So, yeah, I'll definitely come to
Well,
that.
good. You got October 1st plans. Well, I'll be there talking about the Mothman because that's what I do. So
Awesome.
definitely come check that out. We will both be there. Come say hi to the both of us. So
Yeah.
it'll be great. And then immediately the weekend after, I will be at the Wonders Expo in Monroeville, Pennsylvania. So
Okay. Very cool.
right outside of Pittsburgh, speaking there. It's an oddities expo, and I will be probably talking about the Mothman again. I don't know. Maybe I'll switch it up. Maybe I'll talk about something else. I don't know.
Yeah. I knew that I think October 14th to the 16th is the Wild and Weird Con in West Virginia as well. I will be there.
Yes, Wild and
I
Weird
won't be
Con in
speaking
West
or anything like
Virginia.
that. I'm just going to be attending. But if anyone recognizes me, I'll have, some buttons and business cards for Strange Dominions. So come say hi.
Perfect. I won't be speaking at that one. I will probably physically go because it is my good friends over at Wild and Weird West Virginia, Ron and Joe, who that's their event. That's their thing. And I
Are
love
you
them.
doing the investigation with Jesse? I think the night before the main event.
I did not know that there was an investigation the night before.
Yeah, it's like the VIP. I'm
Oh,
definitely going to do that. I'm really excited to go on an investigation with her and Joe. I don't know. I think Joe's going to be there. So yeah,
yes.
it's size enough to be a really cool event.
They're great people. Have you ever met them before?
No, but I've
Oh,
had Jessie on my show, and I've spoken with her a number of times.
oh yeah. Her and Joe are fantastic people. Absolutely highly recommend them. If there, I didn't know there was an investigation going on. I will have to message some people and get
Yeah,
in
I,
on.
I only found out about it through their live stream the other day.
Oh, that makes sense. I'm gonna figure that out. So lots of things, lots of awesome events coming up, and your opportunity. Oh my gosh, the weekend right before Mothman, the Van Meter Visitor Festival in Iowa. If you're out that way, go to that. I don't know for sure yet if I'm going to be there or not. I am trying to get there. But it's not just right up the road. It's about 8 hours away, which isn't bad, but I'm also an adult. So I gotta make sure that I can get there. But if you are close to that area, go to the Van Meter Visitor Festival. Chad Lewis has a huge hand in it. He'll be there. Jeremiah Byron from Bigfoot Society podcast. He'll be there. Friend and fan of the show and previous guest Jeff Craig with the Map in Black, he'll be there. So even if I'm not there, it's still a worthy endeavor if you are physically able to get to it. Plus the Van Meter Visitor, that's a great story, so go learn about it.
Also on October 9th is Albatridge Day in Columbia, Pennsylvania. I will be there. If you're in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and can get there, I highly recommend it. I was there last year. It's a really cool event.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll show up after I'm done speaking at the Wonders Expo.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be in Pennsylvania already. We'll see.
Like originally, I was supposed to be an intern for Timothy Renner of Strange Familiars through my college, but it didn't really turn out that way. But now, for the next 2 months, I'm going to be his conference and festival roadie.
Very cool. You will meet a lot of people.
I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, you'll do tons of things. It's more valuable than, honestly, getting out to these events is the most valuable asset that you can have in this field, especially, learning when you're learning the ropes and all that. Just talking to these people, it's amazing. My favorite part of the Withville UFO festival was afterwards, after the festival, and we all went to the brewery together. And then some of the townspeople came along. And it was listening to them and having them talk about this UFO flap that happened in real time and kind of just how it was received at the time. And, you don't get that information in a book. You don't get that in a podcast. You only get it right from the horse's mouth at these events. And let me tell you, people that have these experiences go to these events a lot. So and then just not to mention all the other great researchers and all that you meet. So, great. Well, I'm glad. I think everybody's set for the next month at least. So
Absolutely.
with their plans. If there's more stuff, we'll let you guys know as it goes on. So why don't you go ahead and give yourself a better, proper introduction? Why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, just the basics, and then we'll kind of jump off from that point.
All right. Well, my name is Octavian Graves. I am the creator and host of Strange Dominions. I started the podcast in technically 2021 in September, but I just didn't start making it public until the January of this year. And basically what it is an exploration of both the occult and the paranormal, and where applicable, trying to find the links and the parallels between the two phenomena.
And I think that is a very worthy endeavor. So when did you get interested in the paranormal in general? What's your origin story there?
From almost day one of existing. I remember being a little kid, and my grandmother used to read me these stories that she had made up herself about a little boy and his dog Spook, who would go investigating places. And she also, I don't know if you're familiar with the author and illustrator Edward Gorey, but he made these very kind of macabre drawings and things like that, and stories to go along with them. And my grandmother introduced me to that as a child. And so that, along with going to the school library and checking out scary stories to tell in the dark, ghost books, Bigfoot books, all that stuff. I mean, this stuff really started for me in the single digits.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. So and that's because just your grandmother, or was your whole family kind of a band of weirdos? I mean,
my grandmother's definitely the weirdo, and then everyone else has lesser degrees of weird, and they accept it, but they don't embrace it too much.
They just put up with it.
They're accepting of my interest in it.
I gotcha. I understand. and that's okay. Did you I don't want to word it. I don't want to word my question that way. When did you start kind of bridging the occult into all of this? When was that something that you were like, oh, this is obviously connected?
Well, when I've been into the occult also since I was a little bit older, probably 10 or 11. I started
Sure.
really getting into it, and that was spawned from my love of heavy metal and heavy metal and the occult. Heavy metal is basically the music of the occult, and I got really into it, and I got really into the aesthetics of it and the history. I never quite figured out how to get into practicing it. Every time I would try and talk to someone who I thought was into the occult, they would basically tell me something like, I can't tell you, you need to figure that out for yourself. And it was kind of a vicious cycle. Like, if I don't know where to go, then how do I get into it for myself?
Sure.
Um, in April of 2021, that whole year, and like the end of 2020, the beginning of 2021, I had experimented for the first time with psychedelics, and I had some pretty good experiences with that. And then my fourth or fifth time, I had I don't call it a bad trip. I just call it a very tumultuous trip, because at the time it was terrifying, but afterwards I got this massive information dump in my brain, and I started to kind of realize how fluid our reality really is.
Sure.
And I had a couple visions in that experience that were very esoteric, and I started to think, like, I just need to do it. Like, there's no reason for me to keep wondering about it. I just need to get into it in any way I could. And so I started with Norse paganism, because that is a side of my family that I'm very interested in. And I started noticing through the folklore and the mythology these parallels between what was told about in the Norse poems and Eddas and things like that, with what people were experiencing in mundane life with the paranormal. There's a lot of parallels between land spirits and Bigfoot. There's parallels between Dogman and certain mythological creatures. And I kind of moved away from the Norse pagan stuff for a while, and I got into ceremonial magic, and I realized how prevalent a lot of things that would go on in a ceremonial ritual or a spirit evocation are to many different areas of the paranormal. And so I started really looking into that specifically, and I found so much information. It's crazy. And I'm still diving in and finding all the specifics. The thing to remember about my show is that I am not a master magician. I'm a magician in training. And what you're listening to when you hear Strange Dominions is really my journey through the paranormal and the esoteric, being broadcast for everyone else. The thing that I realized is I met a lot of people who were very much in the same boat that I was, in the sense that they'd always wanted to get into the occult, but they had no idea how. And a lot of the books they were reading just weren't really giving them the starting point that they needed. And so I kind of saw myself as the poster child for, I want to get into it, but I don't know how. And
Sure.
so what I wanted the show to be was a message to people saying, like, listen, if you don't know how to get into this stuff, listen to me and start with me. Join me on this journey, because we're all in it on the same level. I am not any more advanced than anyone else. I'm just like everyone else in this.
Very cool. Have you considered writing a book about that?
Yes, I have. I'm basically, the way that the podcast is forming to be is that this whole year has been phase one of the operation, which is just reconnaissance and research. And then next year, as I'm in a position to actually start practicing, I'm going to start writing down all of my experiences, all my experiments, and things like that, and my journey, and kind of starting out my own first book.
I love that you have, you seem to have this very good sense of clarity, and understanding that you are still very new. As I mentioned, talking about the Mothman Festival, that is my anniversary for all this weird stuff in my life. At that point, 2 weeks before I went to the Mothman Festival, I was an extreme skeptic. I needed science, and I needed conventional science to back me up on my beliefs. And it was that weekend that changed my entire life, because things happened that, I couldn't, there was no scientific explanation for. It just was. And I am constantly, even at my 3-year mark, beating myself up, because I feel like I haven't done enough. And that's just absolutely ridiculous. And so I'm, continue being forgiving to yourself, please.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely. And I definitely feel that. I mean, this whole year I've been trying to get out into the field and put some of this research and these ideas and theories into practice. But the problem is, no, it's very hard to find someone to go out with you. And I
Yes,
know first and foremost the dangers and the perils of going out by yourself
alone,
into the
right.
woods at night, with very little protection or anything like that, just to
Or
get
just
some research done.
yeah,
And
lack of
so,
experience. I mean, it can be very dangerous. So you're right. It's a slow process. It's slow, and that's okay. That it is. These people that you look up to when you start into these things. Think about it. You're looking up to them, and they've been doing this for how long? Yeah, and they're still learning. And so it's, again, being forgiving to yourself, I think is extremely important. And you're right, finding other like-minded people who are local, because you'll make so many friends that live from everywhere.
oh yeah, I already have.
Yeah.
You, Timothy Renner, Soraya Ascath from Where Did the Road Go podcast. I've made a lot of really, really valuable. I mean, Jesse and Joe from
Hellbent Holler.
yes, Hellbound
Yeah.
Hollow. Sorry, I know that she does Wild and Weird as well. I was going to say that, but I was like, wait, that's not her main show. But yeah, I've made a lot of really valuable and interesting contacts through doing this already, and I've only
Oh,
been into it for less than a year at this point.
oh yeah, and you will, and it will, and you'll start living for the moments that you're surrounded by those people. I promise. You're attracted to these events. You don't go just to meet the fans and just to go because it's fun. Eventually it gets to the point you just go just to see your people,
Oh yeah.
because a lot of us don't have that at home. Of course we might have some strange friends, right? But they're not really into it like we're into it. So I can relate. I was very lucky to find Anne, my research partner, and still, even still, Anne's just along for the ride. Like she'll just do whatever it is I tell her. So find yourself an Anne, but yeah, I think that. I think that you're definitely on the right path to all these things. How do you identify spiritually? When people's like, "What's your spirituality?" What do you say?
You know, I've contemplated that question a lot, and I think that the best way for me to describe it is as a polytheistic animist, meaning that I work with and I am interested in pretty much a wide variety of pantheons and spiritual practices, and I'm also an animist, so I believe that there are spirits within everything in the natural world, and yeah. So, and the funny thing is that when people hear me say that, especially when I tell them that I still kind of identify as a Norse pagan, they're like, "Well, the ceremonial and grimoire stuff is all very Christian. How does that work? Doesn't that kind of how does that jive with the pagan stuff?" And the way that I tell them is that, a long time ago, before there was a church, before there was a synagogue, there were the Canaanites, and they were a polytheistic culture. And Elohim, Yahweh, El, these were all separate gods. These were all separate entities. And as the Canaanites fell and Judaism came up and then Christianity, those gods all basically got morphed into one singular entity that we know as, the hypercosmic God. So you can take that however you want, but I'm still not necessarily sold on the Christian God being one singular entity.
Sure, I think a lot of people, even the Christians in the community, can agree that the Bible itself, the Christian Bible, is heavily, heavily mistranslated and purposefully mistranslated to gain some type of control over people. And
Absolutely. And if you've listened to the show, my fans will know that, especially in the beginning of the show, I was very outspoken about my criticisms of Christianity. And I've kind of narrowed that down to my criticisms of churchianity, where,
right,
yeah,
or just organized religion,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
in general, it's all seated in just control of masses, and that's what it is. But I agree. I share very similar views to you, but also different. But I tell people all the time, it's not uh, just because I have my view on something doesn't mean that you're wrong or somebody else is wrong or whatever. It's just that not religion, spirituality is very personal. And
Absolutely.
it is what you make it. When I almost died a couple months ago, it really ramped up. Before that point, I'd always been interested in near death experiences. And of course, after having my own, I took a new interest in the topic, and had really been digging into people's experience. I've had people reach out to me just in solidarity, like, "Hey, you're not alone. I've been through this too, but this is what happened to me." And I've listened to their stories, and it's amazing how different they all are. There's some people that will tell you straight up and down, like, "Listen, I know that Christianity is the way because I went to hell and I was told if I didn't repent, this is where I was going to live, yada, yada, yada." I've had people that have died multiple times in their life and nothing happened. Nothing.
Mhm.
They just came back, So who knows what that is? Is it, things firing off in the brain, making you believe whatever it is that you're already predestined to believe because of the way you're brought up? Maybe it could be, or there could be something to it. A lot of these near death experiences mimic, not to sound like Joe Rogan, but mimic what happens when you do DMT.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've had my experiences with that. I've never broken through. For some reason, my body like rejects it. Like it's involuntarily terrified of the
Yeah,
experience, and it will not let me get past the point of no return.
yeah, I believe that. Some people are just that's what happens, and I don't necessarily know why. Gosh, hold on a second. I have a cat that's trying to wrestle his way onto my computer area. Okay.
I know how that is. The only reason that hasn't happened to me yet is because I'm in the basements and the basement, and I'm not the cats aren't allowed down here. So
That's what I should do. Lock them out, but then they'll like fucking try to ram my door and like break
oh
it
yeah,
down. So so I just let them and I just deal with it as they come. But anyway, fucking cats. And we're talking about stuff that they like. So uh,
absolutely, we attracted them.
they're like, "You're talking about me." I know. They're like, "Tap me in." I know.
Yeah,
Um anyway, but yeah, so I mean, as whatever, and I believe these near death experiences happen because again, it's personal.
yeah,
We're all on our own personal journey, on our own personal path, and what that path means for us just depends on a million different factors. Like I subscribe to numerology really heavily, actually. And that means I subscribe to life paths, and I just believe that it's just cyclical, and you're just being recycled over and over again to complete this path for whatever reason. I don't know why. It's not up to me to know why. I'm living here and now. That is what's up to me. So for the most part, I don't really think too much about like I don't think too much about afterlife, or where do we go, and this, that, and the other. I don't. It has no bearing on me now. So
yeah.
but that,
I try to keep myself from those thoughts. They definitely become intrusive at a certain point.
they do, and that's my problem with it. And it's just that I'm just gonna obsess over it, and there's no reason, and it's gonna take time away from the here and now, and I'm not gonna accomplish what I'm put here to do anyway. So you know. So with your tie-in to a lot of this stuff, and I feel like what do they call it now? They call it the woo still, right?
Oh yeah,
We're we're woo believers, I guess. Um, what was one of the biggest cases that you noticed, that you kind of like took onto yourself and started really theorizing about this is something bigger than what's typically reported? Does that make sense?
yeah, it does.
Okay.
So one of the things that I've been researching, actually because of the podcast, I have gotten at this point 3 separate stories about people having shadow people experiences where the shadow people were either benevolent, nice, or they were actually what we would call intermediary spirits, where the shadow people actually introduced my guests to other spirits that they work with in a magical context. One of my guests, Kane Del Sol, who's an author and occultist, he actually formed an entire magical system based on the spirits that he met through these shadow people that he was encountering as a child. So I've been really looking into the similarities between shadow people and how they act and other classes of spirits that people experience on a magical setting.
That's very neat. Because the typical, when you think of shadow person, it's demonic and evil every time. So that is very cool that you've gotten more stories that aren't like that.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the author W.T. Watson.
No, you were telling me about that author, but I haven't looked into them yet.
So he has a couple books out. A book about the paranormal and fog, about black, and then he has another one about black dogs, and then he just released his third book about Canadian monsters and mysteries. In the fog book, he has an account of a woman having a shadow person experience where it was kind of starting off as a very malevolent entity. And as the experiences progressed through the nights, she, I guess, eventually went out of body with the shadow person, and the shadow person kept telling him mysteries, mysteries, or questions, questions. And then she just said, stop, I want to go home, leave me alone. And he just kind of like left, and she was end up in her bed. And I found that to be very interesting about if she had not banished it or told it to leave, and she had kind of went with it, so to speak. I wonder what kind of information she would have gotten, or where that would have taken her.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Has she ever well, this was someone, well, you
Just in a book.
yeah,
I
this
don't
was
remember
not someone you've
the
been able to talk to yet.
experiencer's name. I'd need to ask WT about that. But yeah, that was a really interesting case that I wanted to dig more into.
Yeah, I'm that person. Don't be afraid to just approach people. I read a name in a book and I'm like, let me go see if they have Facebook.
Oh yeah, I've done that a
Usually
couple
they do.
times.
So I'm not afraid at all. But some people don't think about stuff like that for some reason. I don't know why. It's social media. Just reach out. The worst they
Yeah, I
can say
think
is nothing.
the strange thing that I've noticed, I started using the internet back in 2005, and it is the landscape and I guess the etiquette of the internet has changed so much. Where it used to be totally okay and normal to just talk to random people, and nowadays there's a little bit of a hesitation with people talking to people they don't know online. There's almost kind of a strange taboo about it.
Well, I think it's the same concept of how we used to be very neighborly with each other, and we're not
Yeah,
anymore. It's just that people prove time and time and again that they take advantage of these situations, and so it makes people afraid to continue that behavior.
yeah, but I've definitely gone out of my way to message many people of books I've read and things like that, and I've gotten a couple responses. I've gotten a couple kind of closed doors, but other than that, it's been a pretty fruitful endeavor for me.
Yeah, I'm always telling everybody, I'm like, just don't be afraid to ask, especially new podcasters. Who should I have on the show? Well, who do you want on the show? Message them.
Right? Yeah,
Most people will say yes. So, it's not that pressing. But I'm always like that. But especially experiencers and things like that. More often than not, they're willing to talk about their stories. There's a reason why they let it go into a book in the first place and they shared their name.
yeah.
They want to talk to other people about it because they themselves are trying to understand. It's just like when you have a problem and you kind of, you take it to somebody else, right? And you just kind of talk it out. It's not necessarily because you want that person to solve it for you. It's just because talking it out can kind of make you rationalize things a little bit differently.
It can
Uh,
also lead to more information. Just talking to someone casually about your experience, they might bring up an experience similar, but has other attributes to it that are similar
yeah.
to the ones you had that you hadn't mentioned. And then there spawns an entirely new conversation with a lot of insight.
Well, and that's what I tell everybody. Report everything weird that's ever happened to you to me because I want to know what it is. Because just because nothing came of it, just because it happened one time and nothing ever happened ever again, and you don't know what it was and it was weird, but it wasn't a big deal. It could be a big deal. It could be the missing piece of this puzzle, or it could help to further other things that you just don't know. And so I just encourage everyone to talk about all their weird things all the time to everybody anyway, but especially to me. So and you can go on Strange Dominions and talk about it too. So
Absolutely. I always want more experiencers as guests. I've only had a couple on just because those are the ones who've emailed me or messaged me about coming on the show. But I definitely want more just regular people coming on to tell their stories because I think it's good for them to be able to
yeah.
talk about it and also helps me because it aids my research in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what kind of topics? I mean, again, you're still early on in your endeavor here and things will change. You will pick up other things and put down other things and whatnot. But what kind of is there anything that you are like looking forward to in the future, really deep diving into and getting to know more about and hoping to kind of you know makes build some bridges about or close some gaps? Or I mean, is there anything that just really tickles your fancy, I guess?
Yeah. So what I've basically been doing is researching Renaissance and medieval magic and grimoire magic, and that is the actual evocation of spirits into physical manifestation. And I haven't yet practiced because it is a very involved work, and I am unable to do it where I live just because of my home situation. I'm kind of forbidden from doing that. But I'm hoping to actually be able to start practicing that the beginning of next year. And what I want to do with that really is learn the ropes of that and get really good at it and kind of commune with these certain spirits and get to know them and then start asking them questions about the paranormal and seeing what they can tell me. Because one of the things that I find so fascinating, and there's kind of a distinction between old magic and new magic. And new magic doesn't really involve spirits as much. There's definitely applications for spirits to be present and to work with the practitioner, but for the most part, a lot of new magic is more based on uh, the internal aspects of the practitioner or the magician.
Yeah.
Working through your spiritual form, your inner form, things like that. Old magic is much more external. It deals very much with talking to spirits, learning what they have to show you, and then putting that knowledge to use. And so, a lot of magic from that time period, the late antiquity, the medieval and Renaissance periods, a lot of that magic comes from spirits. It's somebody who summoned a spirit and said, "Okay, spirit, what do you have to teach me? What kind of magic can I learn from you?" The spirit tells them, and then there you go. You have basically a new magic practice based on spirit knowledge. And what I want to know, basically, from these spirits is if there's anything they can tell me about. Ways to contact ghosts, ways to contact even cryptids. I know that there's obviously a flesh and blood aspect to cryptids, but there's also a weird aspect, and it may not necessarily be spiritual. But if it is, then a spirit would be able to tell me that, and I would love to know and kind of learn more about how to interact with these entities and for other people to interact with these entities in a more controlled way. So that way you're not so terrified. It's not so surprising. You can actually control the situation and get to know some of these things that people are experiencing in a very terrifying way. I want to kind of break that and get people to see that there are actual methods of contact and methods of protection and things like that, so that way they can really talk to these things themselves. And so I want to talk to the spirits and I want to ask them about these paranormal things and see where that goes, what they can teach me, what roads that opens up for me.
So what cryptids do you think, you know, clearly I know where you stand on it, but you said that there's a flesh and blood aspect to it. Kind of talk about that a little bit more of what you mean by there's a flesh and blood aspect, but there's also some type of phenomena behind it.
So we know that people see and experience Bigfoot, Dogman, even Mothman in the flesh. They see them, they hear them, and in some very rare cases, they are physically touched or in contact with these things. And it can seem very flesh and blood, like they are just a regular animal. But then these other weirder stories come out about Bigfoot cloaking or vanishing, or the old the tracks that just stop and no one knows where they went. They just stop abruptly. And it's a very strange phenomena. And so what I basically want to find out is, what's the deal with that? Where, I can't say for a matter of fact that Bigfoot or Dogman is a spirit that is just coming into our reality in a physical manner. I don't have the proof or the evidence to show that, and so intellectual honesty dictates that I can't state that I know that Bigfoot's actually a spirit that just
Sure.
sometimes becomes physical. But the I definitely feel that there is something else going on with Bigfoot, but more on the side of things like Dogman and the
Sure.
Jersey Devil. There is an author by the name of Jason Miller who put out a new book called Consorting with Spirits, and it's a magic book. It's an occult book, but he tells a story about when he was in New Jersey. He was doing some rituals to Hecate, which is also a spirit or a god that I or goddess that I work with in my own practice.
Hmm.
And he was introduced to the spirit of this witch in New Jersey, and that spirit told him how to evoke the Jersey Devil. And according to him, he did it. Now, this is revolutionary, in my opinion. I've never heard this talked about um, openly. So the idea that this guy was able to summon the Jersey Devil and work with it on a magical level, that opens up so many more doors for the possibility of Dogman being worked with in a magical setting, if it is in fact a spirit, or if Mothman is a spirit, if there's a way of contacting that spirit, and and then that opens up more doors. So, let's just say, for example, you were able to find out that Dogman is actually a spirit that comes in the form of a, a a dog-headed man,
Sure.
human. Um, and you find that out, you find a method of contacting it, you contact it, and now you could find out, what does that spirit have to teach you, what kind of magic does that spirit know about that can impart onto you. And then that just brings up a whole book, basically, of questions and journeys that you can have with these entities. I don't know if that answered your question or
It
not.
does, yeah. I have to tell you something after the show, and I know people hate that, but I'm gonna just keep them
It's
guessing.
okay, I do that all the time with my guests.
Reminds me. So, anyway, and it's about that. So anyway, yes. So do you? I mean, do you? Okay, in this field, I have a difference between my personal opinion and my professional opinion.
I do
Like,
too.
yeah, your professional opinion is things that you have irrefutable evidence to back up that claim, right? You've got, and when you're talking about the unknown, right, most of that irrefutable evidence is just critical thinking. But you've got your facts, right, that you accept as a professional as facts, and then you've got your personal bias.
Hmm.
I want to believe that there is a plesiosaur living in Loch Ness. That is my personal opinion. My professional opinion is that if there's a monster there, it's either something that is not terrestrial or it's just a giant eel, and that's fine. You know, in whatever way, it probably sounds like more your personal opinion. What do you theorize these things are then? Do you think that they are spirits? And then how do you define spirit? What do you consider a spirit?
So, in my professional opinion, I don't know what these things are.
That's
Um,
fair.
the way that I would define a spirit, and this kind of goes into some of my magical thinking
Sure.
in the occult, there is a distinction between ghosts and non human entities or intelligences. So you will see a lot in these grimoires and these magic books talking about spirits, and what they're talking about are mostly chthonic spirits. And a lot of people would also call that a demon. I don't use that term just because I think it's a very outdated and misused term.
Sure.
If you know the history of it, you know that in the Greek mythology, a daemon, spelled Daimon, was actually a helpful spirit. And then when Christianity took over, everything that was not of a holy nature was demonized and turned evil. So that's usually what these books are talking about. But then they also talk about aerial spirits, nature spirits. These are just entities that have always been incorporeal. They have never had a physical form that is native to them. And then you have souls of the dead that come back or are still here and are interact with the living, and we would call that a shade or a ghost. Um, so when I'm talking about spirits, I'm talking about things that are basically inhuman entities.
Okay. Just a catch-all.
Right. Just and
Okay.
when I talk about souls of the dead or things like that, I would use the term shade or ghost.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about aliens. What do you I mean, is there any tie to this and extraterrestrial life, or do you believe that there is any tie between the two? Do you think that it's just another species of human or something like us, or do you think that there's more of a spiritual nature to it?
What I can tell you is that from the research I've done, I have noticed many attributes in UFO encounters that also appear in spirit encounters and in evocation. I'm sure you've heard about when people see UFOs or right before they see UFOs, they hear the sounds of music playing, specifically horns.
Oh yeah.
So this is also a common thing with certain spirits in the grimoires. Before their arrival, many magicians have stated that there is this sound of horns or brass instruments being played right before the spirit actually shows up. Um, there is also the universal attribute of knocking. People will hear knocking in UFO encounters. This is also a thing in spirit encounters. My co-host and mentor, who's been a ceremonial magician for over 12 years at this point, he has noted to me many times that whenever certain spirits show up, he gets these rhythmic knockings, and that is also a thing in both UFO lore and in cryptid lore. So I don't know what aliens are. I don't know what their nature is. I just know that there are similarities between UFO and alien encounters and spirit encounters. Poltergeist activity, this is a very common one. This also shows up in UFO encounters and in alien encounters, as well as spirit encounters. And so really what I have to go on is just these similarities and these parallels. I can't yet make a definite statement about what I think they are. In my opinion, the chances of them just being other humans or little green men is getting
Sure.
slimmer and slimmer by the day, but I
Mhm.
do still hold that that is a possibility.
That's a good answer. I mean, and you know what? It's okay to say that you don't know. I don't think anybody expects you to know everything.
Yeah,
But until they do, and then you're like, "Well, I'm sorry, I just don't." But no, it's that's a very popular take. With a lot of us is that what we see is you're absolutely right. A lot of this stuff mimics each other, and let's just go with the fucking obvious. Look at things like the Presque Isle incident. You had a couple whose car broke down. They saw some craft crash into the woods. The men went to go check it out with two police officers, and the women, while they were away, had an encounter with a Bigfoot.
yeah.
What are the fucking chances that Bigfoot's just roaming around Presque Isle, which I've been to? It's not really Bigfoot country. While they also saw a UFO, what?
And this happens all the time. I mean, there are
Exactly.
more and more accounts of Bigfoot being seen before or after, or even during UFO encounters. So
Yeah.
while I don't think we have any authority to say that they are one and the same or that they are
Sure.
intimately connected fundamentally, there's definitely something going on between the UFO and Bigfoot encounter. I mean, Chestnut Ridge is probably one of the best
Oh yeah.
well known examples, but there are many others like that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and you mentioned the poltergeist activity, Skinwalker Ranch. There were reports of UFOs all the time, and poltergeist activity within the home, portals that these scientists who had nothing to gain by saying that they saw fucking portals and things crawling out of them pop up, but you had all this activity happening, these dog-like creatures, all in the same area, and this you're right, things like this happen all the time. John Keel has a very popular theory about it, and he calls these areas window areas, and that's why all these things tend to happen at once. You don't typically just have a UFO flap, right? You have a UFO flap and also all of these other things happening at the exact same time in the same
Absolutely,
area.
and it's no wonder why many occultists and when many magicians will look for ley lines to do their work, or go to specific areas where it is known to be haunted or cryptid activity is known to occur to do their magical work. And I think that is because, and I can't say this for sure, but there is definitely some sort of magical, for lack of a better term, energy that exists in the places that this weird stuff happens.
Sure. Sure. I think that's when I first started, one of the things that we had started doing initially was mapping all this stuff out and just kind of seeing. And if you take the map and you look at it, and not to shill him again, but I will, Jeff Craig's Map in Black, great example. If you look at these areas of these strange things happening, they all happen in clusters. And if you look at the map and you look at it from right to left, you've got the East Coast that's just filled with all this stuff. Into the Midwest is filled with all this stuff. Then you kind of get more into Central America. That's not really. It's pretty sparse. There's
Yeah.
things that happen, but there's really not a lot. And then you get down to the West Coast, and there's all this stuff. When I spoke with Jeff about it, and I was curious, hey, why do you think this happens this way? He is a cartographer. That's what the man does for a living. And I asked him, what do you think? What's the deal with that? He had a very simple answer. It's just because in the middle of the country there's less people. So maybe, you know what? Maybe the theory that there's a pattern to it could be just completely bullshit. Maybe there are less people, but that, doesn't mean that the center of the country, the central of America, doesn't have their own weird things happening. It's just that there's not enough people to report it because there's not people there. Who knows? But either way, whether or not the big picture is something, when you take it on a smaller scale and you start looking at it on a smaller scale and you start lining all these things up together, they do still happen in clusters and they seem to happen at the same time. So, there's that. Somebody had mentioned the 1960s to me. They were like, oh man, the 1960s, it was so weird during the 1960s. Lots of weird happenings and stuff. And initially, when I started, I was trying to build a timeline for this stuff. I also believed that something happened in the 60s and made all this stuff appear. Um, then I quickly found out that the 1970s were also very weird, and the 1950s were also very weird. And then that's when I came to the conclusion that, it's not that these things stop and start. They don't. They're always happening all the time. But what is consistent is that they're always happening in the same areas.
Yes, absolutely. Location is super key in a lot of these, and honestly, most of these encounters and phenomena. The location really dictates a lot more than people realize.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And, being somebody that's in Ohio, I'm very lucky to be in a prime area for this stuff. It's kind of almost like the central hub, it seems. Which is great. But yeah, location is really important. Not so much the time frame itself. I don't give a shit about a UFO flap, if I'm honest. I mean, I guess, it's interesting, but I don't personally think that these things actually happen that way. I think that they happen. I think it catches fire and it becomes popular and trendy, and then somebody ends up being there to report on it, and then people have somebody that they can come and talk to about it, so that they have that comfort, and then eventually it just kind of, the wind falls out of the sails, and then it just kind of goes away. But it still doesn't stop, because you still have people reporting on it. And I use the Mothman phenomena to explain that it didn't stop when the Silver Bridge collapsed. It continued.
Oh yeah,
I'll say
absolutely. And in different
um,
states, I know that Virginia is the hub of Mothman, but it doesn't mean that Mothman doesn't show up in a lot of different places.
Oh yeah, a lot of different places. They just call, and that's what I say. They just call it something else, wherever it is. It's just Mothman here. It's not Mothman in other places. Over in the UK, they've got the Owlman, which is another popular, and I think people pretty much accept that that's the same phenomena. Is but there's other stuff too. There's like winged humanoid women. Basically very very feminine forms with the same red eyes. Physically, the whole being is glowing, but still that weird dark humanoid shape. It's the same phenomena. It's just happening other places.
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. And the images of some of these creatures are really telling, and another crossover to a lot of the magical stuff. I mean, in so many of the grimoires, you have. Let's just take one of the well-known spirits, which we'll say is Baal. He
Sure.
shows up, classically speaking, as I think the body of a tarantula, the head of a man, the head of a frog, and the head of something else. And if anyone saw that out in the woods, it would get classified as a cryptid.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
the application for these things showing up the way they do is a lot larger than I think people realize, and it has a lot more implications, in my opinion, than just a weird animal. I think that there is a I don't want to say a species, but there's definitely a precedent for these things showing up the way they do.
My own theory about some of these things, like you talked about Dogman, and Bigfoot. We'll use Bigfoot as an example. I genuinely believe that there is an undiscovered species of primate roaming around North America. I believe that this thing is probably all across the entire world, again, in different names and slightly different variations of this giant primate that we just haven't caught yet. I'm 100% for flesh and blood Bigfoot. I also believe that there are people who come across Bigfoot and it is walking in the woods and it comes behind a tree and then it's completely gone, just vanishes, disappears behind that tree. I do think that stuff happens. What I think happens is whatever is causing that type of encounter, that weird paranormal supernatural type of encounter, is that you have just experienced one of these things for whatever reason. You were meant to know that you just experienced something highly strange, but they can't present themselves the way that they would be because they don't really, for one, they don't really have a form and not one that we could comprehend because we're just basic third dimensional creatures. And so they have to take on the form of something, but it can't just be like a coyote. They really got to make it stick that you had this experience and make that experience valid. And I think that that's what happens a lot in the dogman phenomena. Um, those things. I don't think that there is a flesh and blood terrestrial dogman. It doesn't make sense. Our
I
fossil
don't
record
either.
isn't complete. Yeah, our fossil record isn't complete. So, it's hard to judge, but there isn't anything that indicates why they would evolve to walk upright. It just doesn't make any sense. There's no advantage to it, except for maybe to reach, things in trees. But, canines don't really eat a lot of fruit. Um,
Right, and you know what's funny is that the image of the dog man being half man, half dog, it implies a lot through mythology than it does natural history, because I don't know if you know why Anubis looks the way he does in Egyptian lore, and it's because he is the god of the dead. And in Egypt, dogs were both loved and hated, and kind of seen as a pest because when they would bury their dead, they had to do it in a way that the jackals and dogs would not come and dig up the body and eat the dead, because they that can't happen in the Egyptian culture. Like, your body has to be fully intact for you to go off into the afterlife. And so the fact that Dogman shows up as half man, half dog, very similar to Anubis, and then also is seen so often in cemeteries and graveyards and areas
yeah.
of the dead. I mean, there is so many implications there.
Yeah, that is really, I did not know that that's why Anubis looked that way. Um, but that makes perfect sense, actually. I would agree with that. Well, and we kind of talked about it with the episode of Lyle, how they've changed. Maybe it wasn't with Lyle, maybe it was somebody else I talked to about it. I talk to so many people about weird things all the time. But we were just kind of talking about how dogmen changed. They used to be not very big. They were like 4 feet tall. And they just look pretty. I mean, they look like canines. They just look like dogs that were walking upright.
Right, but
That had
now
the
you have
ability.
like jackal-headed ones, hyena-headed ones, German
Yeah,
Shepherd-looking ones.
they're huge.
Yeah, and it's crazy how they've become so varied over the years as far as the sightings go.
Right. And is that because people are making up stories and that's not actually happening? Well, we know that some people do. We know that a lot of people do. We know a lot of people they do make up their stories, but I don't think everybody is. I don't think everyone is. I think that they're just changing with the times because again, whatever these things are, they're intelligent and they're doing it on purpose. What that purpose is, I don't know. I have no idea. And I'm not going to say people are special or, marked or whatever for, having these experiences. They very well could be. I think, again, they're personal experiences and you see them because you needed to for whatever reason. Then it's up to you to kind of do the work and figure out why. And then that answer is different for everybody. I mean, and that's just, I mean, again, that's just going strictly off of Mothman sightings.
Right, of
I know
course.
that is a very personal experience.
One thing that
Um,
I find interesting about that is a lot of magicians, including my co-host Luke, he's reported this many times. After a lot of people do a full evocation of a spirit, for the weeks after that ritual, they will have poltergeist activity. They will see many different kinds of spirits in their homes or just in their waking life. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the spirit that they contacted, but it's almost like moths to a flame. When you have contact with this one kind of entity, then everything else in the area sees that you have the ability to see and communicate with this thing, and now
Right.
they just we don't know why they do this, but it's across the board in many different magical systems that involve contacting spirits. That once you contact one, it's kind of like the green light for a lot of other entities to come in and try and communicate with you.
Very interesting. Well, and that makes sense because people that um, have experiences in high strangeness don't typically just have one. You know,
Right.
when you first talk to an experiencer, um, because that's one thing that I do that I feel like a lot of people don't do. A lot of researchers miss out on the opportunity. I don't just talk to these people and gather their stories. I curate a whole friendship with them, you know, and we continue to go on and have friendships. I know their families. I know what they do for a living. I know their everyday life. I talk to them. We're friends, and they'll tell you one story. And of course, I'll ask, "Does anything else happen?" No, nothing else. That's it. Nothing else. And then eventually, they kind of come out and they're like, "Well, this other thing happened." People tend to have these experiences over and over and over again. And one thing that is also completely across the board, 100%, is that these people that have these experiences experience trauma in their life, some type of mental or physical trauma. And I don't know what comes first yet. Is it the chicken or the egg? Is it the trauma that because trauma physically changes the brain, whether it be physical or mental trauma, it will physically change how the brain operates. So is it the trauma itself that gives us some type of other ability, or is it that they were already predisposed anyway? I really have no idea. I can't answer that. But I haven't met anybody yet who's had these experiences who hasn't experienced trauma.
Yeah, there's an interesting correlation between that, and one of the things that I wanted to incorporate in the show is how the paranormal and the occult also interacts with psychedelic experiences. And one of the things that obviously I've experienced with mushrooms, and the interesting thing about mushrooms is that it does not add anything to your brain chemistry or the chemicals in the brain. It simply changes the pathways of your brain very subtly. Um, and so it's not adding anything, it's simply just changing things. And I wonder if there is any kind of correlation between that and, because a lot of times when you have a really extreme, both good and bad experience with mushrooms or any psychedelic, really, it changes how you see the world indefinitely. It definitely did for me.
Oh yeah.
Um, and so I wonder if there's any correlation there about when people see these creatures or have these weird experiences, how it actually, and like you said, like trauma, like how it changes the brain and what that means about seeing things, afterwards, or having multiple experiences. Is it just that your brain is now exposed to this new way of thinking and you notice it more, and things have the ability to become more visual or more apparent to you?
Yeah. I have a plan to do, down, it's going to be way down the line, just in catch up in my career, but I want to do a DMT documentary where we get people to do it, and scan the brain at the same time and record the experiences. It's hard to do, it's costly, and then of course finding medical staff that would be willing to partake in something like that is difficult, but I think it would be a worthy endeavor for us to look into to see, because if we can see what happens in the brain when people do crossover and they do make that contact, then we could start kind of reverse engineering that, figure out how to do that without the use of psychedelics to have to do it. We can figure out how to unlock that for everybody without being on them. If we can, if even that's a possibility. And I think it would be, again, very worthy for us to discover. Um, and some people hear that talk and they're just like, oh, you just want to do drugs. Well, so, but also there is something to it.
I can tell
I
you from at least my experience that after the experience I had with mushrooms, drugs are not a fun thing. They're not done, at least for me personally, I would not do them for a good time or for a party. They are truly, golden teachers are called that for a reason. They are truly there to teach you stuff. And for me, I would only do it again if I really had knowledge to seek or needed some kind of like really important experience to tell me about something, almost kind of like a divination session, but in a different way. But yeah, for me, psychedelics specifically are not something to be taken lightly or to be done for fun. For me, they're much more of a, I guess, a spiritual substance, really.
And what's wild is that the only people that really get that are people that have done it. People that haven't done it, they hear drugs and it's just they're automatically shut off to the idea, without doing the research, without knowing what's really there. You don't know how life changing that experience is until you've done it. And it is very life altering, and you can't just like dose somebody. That's another thing about it. Like, you have to go into, you can't just like be like, oh, I'm gonna go do shrooms today. You can't do that.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't work. You're gonna have a terrible time. You know, you have to get into a specific mindset in order to jump in and do it. I had a friend who, I used to do a bunch of drugs for fun, recreationally. I don't now, but I have. And one of my friends at a party got dosed with acid, liquid acid in their drink, and had a terrible time. They were tripping, and how horrifying that is. All of a sudden, reality is not reality, you know.
Hmm.
And so, you can't just go do it. You can't just go do drugs. That's not a good idea. And I don't endorse that.
Yeah, me
Um,
either.
but I've had people, when I share my Mothman encounter with people, I've gone on shows and they have edited out the fact that I admit that we were doing edibles that night.
Yeah, see, that's crazy to me, especially nowadays when we know that,
Right.
edibles don't cause
They
hallucinations.
don't. Right, they do not. And it's like the science is there. I mean, so, but they have, so it just shows how stigmatized stuff like that still is. And then somebody had accused me, I mean, just from that show, they had accused me of like falsifying my story. Well, she did drugs that night. She didn't admit that. And I'm like, why would I go and tell my story everywhere else?
Right? Yeah.
Accurately, and then expect that nobody's ever heard it before and come on this show and lie.
Yeah,
That
yeah, I
doesn't even
know.
make sense.
It's very strange. I sent you on
Yeah,
Messenger a screenshot, and I really don't. We don't talk about the name
sure.
of the area because it is private property. But that's where I had two actually pretty incredible experiences. And the reason I sent that to you is so you could see just how small of an area that is, and how on the path that I was on, if you look both to your left and your right, obviously there's a forest, but you can see through the forest into the neighborhood that it's bordering
Hmm.
right there. I mean, there is no real cover at all in this
Right.
area. And that was something that really changed my mind about just how weird this stuff is, especially when it comes to Bigfoot and cryptids. And obviously intellectual honesty, I can't say that I had a Bigfoot experience because I didn't see anything. Everything I experienced was totally audible and kind of like an internal feeling.
So tell
But
the story.
okay, so the area that I was in, Timothy Renner on Strange Familiars has done a couple episodes on it, and he calls it Gazoo's Woods, and I also call it Gazoo's Woods. He has a whole story about why it's called that, and I had heard his episode on it, and I found the area, and I went there. I'd been there twice before with some friends of mine, and nothing really happened. But I went there by myself, and I was walking on the trail, and I realized that I had never gone past a specific point. And so, as I was walking up to the threshold, I guess, from where I usually had been to where I wanted to go, I I heard what sounded like whistling, like all over. And it was not a bird. It sounded much more like something imitating a bird. Maybe like a human imitating a bird, but there were no people around. It's a very small park. You know when someone's around. So I heard the whistling coming from all over, mostly behind me. And then I heard three tree knocks. And then all of a sudden, all of these birds in a pine, in a tree ahead of me just took off and started screaming like they had seen something or something like that. And I got this really weird feeling. It was not mind speak or anything like that. It was just a feeling like, okay, if you go forward, you're not gonna you can either leave or go forward. But if you go forward, you're gonna see something you don't want to see or you're not prepared to see. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'll take that. And I started walking back to my car. And probably 5 or 6 steps backwards, I hear something grunt. And I mean, it was a heavy grunt because I felt it in my chest. And I walked back to my car and I drove home and I was very, very freaked out. Now, I didn't see anything except for the birds. I didn't see a big, hulking, hairy monster coming towards me or in the trees or anything like that. I just heard stuff. But given how small that area is, I don't really. The biggest thing in that area is a deer. We don't even have bears in that area. Bears are out west. This is more in the Northeast, and it yeah, it really set me on a path into this weirder aspect of Bigfoot and cryptids and things like that.
And those stories are always the hardest because most of them are built off of just how you felt, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it was
And
a weird feeling because I wasn't.
yeah,
Fear was not the right word. I wasn't scared. I think I was just perplexed beyond my capability. Does that make
right.
sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as someone that has these experiences a lot, yeah. It does. And that's the thing about it is that people don't, yeah, they don't get it unless they've had that experience. You just feel it in every part of your body. You feel it, and it's just I don't want to say it's some type of knowing. It's so weird. I don't even know how to explain it, but I know exactly what you mean.
And then it was very strange because when I met Timothy for the first time, he met me in those woods because he wanted to see where it happened. And while we were walking up to the area that I had my encounter, I was explaining to him that that whole day, walking up to the woods, I would hear light tapping, not full on tree knocks, but just light tapping, and they were in a rhythmic fashion.
Sure.
And then as soon as we get into the area that I'm showing him, that tapping starts. And that tapping followed us throughout the day. From noon till 5 p.m., we were surrounded by this tapping. And we both listened to every single kind of woodpecker or bird that does that to
Sure.
try and get some kind of reference. Nothing. Nothing sounded like what we experienced. And if you want to hear that, it is episode 293, I believe, on Strange Familiars. It's called Evocation of Gazoo. And yeah, you can hear the whole thing. You can hear us reacting. You can hear the taps. It was a very, very strange day.
I haven't had a chance to talk to Timothy Renner myself yet. I plan on it. It's just I figured we'd see each other somewhere at some point.
Yeah, well, if
you
you
know,
come to Albatwitch Day, that's like his big day. So he'll definitely be there, and I'll be there with him as well.
awesome. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I'd love to. I've read his book. I've read the books that he did with God. I can't think of
Josh
the other guy.
McCutcheon. Those are
Thank
two
you.
very influential books for me.
They're very good, right? If people want to get into the woo, where the footprints end, and then also Ron Moorhead's oh my God, what is it?
Quantum Bigfoot?
Quantum Bigfoot.
I
Yes,
haven't read that yet. I really need to, though.
fantastic, fantastic. They're not they're I heard a saying from Tobias Whalen, and I believe it was actually Carl Sagan that said it first. I don't know who exactly said it first. But keep an open mind, not so open that your brains fall out, right?
Right, yeah.
They're that I mean, they're just here's what it is. Don't know what this is, but there's something to this.
And there's an important thing I think a lot of people, when they hear me talk about Bigfoot being a spirit or using magic to investigate Bigfoot, they don't realize that what I do when I do go out looking for Bigfoot is I kind of start off from a very flesh and blood perspective where I look at the terrain, I look at
Yeah,
the wildlife that's in that area, I look at the water source and if there is a water source, and I kind of start my investigation off as if I'm just looking for another animal. And
yeah,
then as I progress and I start noticing things, I then put pieces together with the woo and the esoteric aspects that I've learned about, and I kind of form a profile based on that. And then usually, after doing it a couple times, I find that it ends up being a much weirder profile than not.
yeah. Usually, right? That is the way. That's now becoming like the new thing. What do you take with you on an investigation? Everything. Yeah. Be prepared for everything.
Yeah, and,
Um,
and the other thing is that if and I can't say, and if it comes out tomorrow that Bigfoot really is just a completely normal flesh and blood animal, I won't be disappointed. I won't be
right.
upset. But what I want to do is want to start imparting onto people the idea that even if it is just a flesh and blood animal, you could start doing things that are out of the ordinary that might get its attention for you to have contact or you to have an experience or you to investigate in a different way. For example, when you watch these shows of people going out looking for Bigfoot, finding Bigfoot, Expedition Bigfoot, all these things, what are they wearing? They're wearing camo, and they are all wearing camo, and it's always, 10 to 12 dudes knocking on trees. Not only does that probably piss Bigfoot off, but he's seen it 1,001 times,
Yeah.
if not more. So what would happen if you walked in there with a censer and incense, a white robe, and you cast a circle and you just waited and saw what kind of attention you brought upon yourself? How does that change the nature of the encounter? There's a lot of things that we could start doing that doesn't necessarily mean that the entities that we're talking about are spiritual or magical in any way, but it would show that it would give them something new to look at and something new to scope out and see what it's all about.
Well, something curious. I mean, think about it. If Bigfoot is a flesh and blood creature, they're learning how to evade hunters. And that is one thing that I'll say. Hunters don't tend to have a lot of experience. Most of the time, they'll be like, I go out in the woods all the time. I've never seen anything.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, guess what? Human with a gun.
Mm-hmm.
They know enough to know to avoid that. Even if they're just basic animals, they know enough that that's dangerous. So if you go out there looking like a human with a gun with your camo and your hat, I don't know what they wear out there, or whatever, they're going to stay away from you. Yeah,
It's
they're going to be
funny
like,
because, and I'm sure you know this about how dogs and cats, they can kind of sense people to be around and people to not be
yeah,
around before they even really get to know them. And
oh
I
yeah,
imagine, how many people you hear, well, if I saw Bigfoot, I would shoot it dead. And you walk into the woods with that mindset. And I'm not saying Bigfoot necessarily can read your mind, but they can definitely sense that kind of idea
hmm
on you.
yeah.
And
Well,
why would they
that's
want to
why
be around you?
reading.
Why would they want to chance that? I mean, we know that shooting Bigfoot doesn't really work, does it? I mean, how
Yeah.
many stories have we heard about Bigfoot getting shot and nothing happens? It just goes right through them, or it doesn't even affect them. So I think that's just a very, I hesitate to say ignorant, but it's a very misinformed way of going about the phenomena.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Well, that's why reading Ron Moorhead's Quantum Bigfoot is important because he does talk a lot about that. Not bringing a bunch of weapons, not bringing nothing because you do have other, bears are still real, right?
Mountain
Coyotes,
lions, wolves, even coyotes can be vicious.
right? I mean, you still have vicious animals. Bring basic protection, but don't bring this whole arsenal with the intent to shoot to kill. Don't bring dogs, is what he says. Do not bring your dog there, because they will avoid things like dogs because dogs are unpredictable and their only job is to protect you.
And how many people have had their dogs killed during Bigfoot experiences?
Some
I
people
mean,
say
that's a
that
pretty
they have.
common thing. I mean, that famous 911 call out of Washington. The reason he called was because he saw this thing, and he even said, 2 weeks ago my dog got killed out there. So obviously, it's even, you don't bring your dog out there because it's going to upset the Bigfoot and it's dangerous for your dog.
Right. Exactly. Yep. And that's what Ron says. Don't do it. But he kind of gives you this guide as to how to have a Bigfoot encounter. And I love Ron more. I can't say it enough. I love the guy. He's so no nonsense. He's just like, look, these are the facts. This is what it is. These things are real. You can believe me. You don't have to, but here's what I got.
Absolutely.
And I love that. He just lays it all out there. But yeah, I mean, you're right. When I investigate, it's an odd thing to kind of explain because it is a new we're experiencing in this community, we're experiencing this big shift, whether people want to recognize that or not, it doesn't matter, it's happening. And the big shift is coming in, where we are kind of back to, for a long time you were like, strange things happen, maybe it's all connected. And then we had people that were just kind of specializing, and that's where cryptozoology came from. You came from a couple of zoologists who were specializing in just the animal aspects, and we need people that specialize in their area. I'm not great at paranormal stuff. It's a part of it, and if that's where my path takes me, then that's where I'll go, but it's not my big focus. I'm even kind of falling out of cryptozoology and more into ufology nowadays, and I suspect that throughout my career I'm just kind of going to bounce between all the things depending on what it is I'm investigating at the time. But the shift that we have going on is definitely people recognizing that there are ties to this stuff whatever that may be. And so now we do have people that are going out on investigations, and they are investigating intuitively. Um, I just call it the universe. It's a catch-all term, but the universe tells me what to investigate. It brings me cases,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll go out. If it's a physical location that I have to go out to, I'll go out to that physical location. I'll tell you what, sometimes I go out there and I just know immediately this ain't it. It's not the day. I
Right. Yeah.
Nothing's going to happen. I'll hang out, I'll entertain the idea, right? And I'll see, or see what's going on. But sometimes I just already know walking in there, this ain't gonna be it. And then sometimes I walk in and it's crazy magical and amazing things happen. And granted, it's never been any hard concrete evidence, but for me, in my personal experience, it's been very significant.
Yeah, and that's something that I've always worried about getting flack about, is because there's so many people who are already out there doing it specifically just to gain evidence. That's not my concern. I'm not really worried about getting hard evidence. What I'm interested in and what I want to impart on other people is the idea of just go out and have an experience and just savor that experience and investigate that experience personally. You don't
Right.
have to necessarily go out and get footprints. You don't have to get out and go and get pictures and videos, because we've seen that that's not going to bring us the validity that a lot of people think it is. So instead of putting all your effort into that, because there's already so many people doing it, and we're very thankful for them to do that, because it's hard work. I know it is. I think that for a lot of people, what they need to start doing is worry less about the evidence and worry more about just having that experience and learning from a personal standpoint about that experience and how it affects you.
Yeah. My genuine belief is that these things that I think are the same thing, they're way more intelligent than we are. They're way more advanced than we are. We're not going to know what they are until they tell us what they are.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. But granted, my job then now becomes not so much proving something, with beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now it's putting the pieces together of this big puzzle to open up the possibility to everybody else. Because I think people forget that too when you're in this community, is that it's a very small community.
Yeah, it really
We're
is.
Yeah, we're still not there yet. It's getting more popular, but like people don't even. The fact of the matter is that, listen, if you don't believe in life forms from other planets, whether or not they visit us, that part doesn't matter. If you don't believe in intelligent life on other planets, you're already wrong. I can tell you that much. It's so big out there beyond
Yeah.
us. It's almost an impossibility that there isn't some type of intelligent life out there, and there are still people that don't believe that.
I know.
So what's that?
I was just saying I know, and it's
Oh,
crazy. I don't
yeah, yeah, yeah.
understand how they just ignore this.
That's so narrow-minded, right? And so, but the fact of the matter is that that's where we are right now with all of the fringe, is that we're just not a big, but there's so many people that don't give a shit about Bigfoot. I got a 10-year-old daughter. She's like, I don't believe in Bigfoot. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you're grounded. Get out of my house. I'm going to take you to the children's home. But no, but she doesn't, and doesn't even care to hear about it. Doesn't even want to hear about it. Has no interest. There's people that just have absolutely no interest in any of this.
Well, it's interesting, and I was talking to someone about this a few weeks ago, about how if you looked at how many people said they were interested in the paranormal, and then how many people are actually going out and investigating or looking for the paranormal, there would be such a massive discrepancy in numbers of people.
Oh
The
yeah,
amount of people who are
absolutely.
interested in are so much more vast than the people who are actually on the field doing the work.
Absolutely. Well, and even then, you got paranormal investigators that go to these haunted places, right? And they get their little evidence, their little videos of the doors moving on their own or whatever. And you bring up Bigfoot to them,
I know.
they're like, no, that's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
it's very, very compartmentalized in their minds, and I think, and if there's one thing that I hope that you, me, Timothy Renner, all these people can do is blow that idea out of the water, just to begin with, get people
Just bring
really,
us all together.
yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I have a couple ideas about how we can really evolutionize the idea of ghost hunting. There is a play from very, very early on in Greece called The Libation Bearers, and it has a direct route from these guys who go out antagonizing ghosts. And a lot of people disagree with this method, and I did for a long time until I realized that that is actually an aspect of necromancy. I mean, the play is basically a son and daughter go out to their father's grave, and they basically insult him, his spirit, and tell him, all these nasty things to get him riled up. And then they go and send him, or have him send a spirit to kill their stepmother who is stealing all of their money. And I think it's a very, very interesting correlation between that and going into a haunted house and cursing at the spirit to get activity. Now, whether you agree with that or not, that's totally up to you. But there is precedent for that for that method throughout history.
Huh. That's very interesting. I do that a lot. I shit talk a lot, and I probably
Yeah, and
should,
in
but it works.
Absolutely. And I think that, ghost hunters, whether they will never agree with me on this, and I hope they would someday, they're participating in some form of necromancy, whether they like it or not.
Right.
Necromancy is the act of speaking with the dead. Now, the cool thing, and this is one thing that I would really like to see happen, is more ghost hunters utilizing necromantic methods and then getting to know the spirits or the ghosts that they're communicating with, and then using, talking to that ghost and getting it to tell you other methods of forming a relationship with these other ghosts that you're trying to get in contact with. Because I think just going out there and getting evidence, it's kind of disrespectful. These spirits, these ghosts they have emotions, they have minds, they have things like that. And I
Spirit
think,
feelings matter too.
yeah, exactly. And I think it would be a lot cooler if we started building relationships with these ghosts and these shades than just kind of exploiting them for YouTube, honestly.
And I think that's a novel idea. I really do. I think that you're onto something there. Why not try it? We've done all the same shit for so long. Let's try something different.
Right, exactly.
Well, let's try it and just see what happens. I agree with that. But for one, you were talking about, how they, the ghost hunters talk shit about the cryptozoologists, and the cryptozoologists talk shit about the ufologists, and there's all this infighting and stuff like that. That's ridiculous. We need people with specialties. That's what we need.
Absolutely.
Not a single one of us can do all of it.
I want to see
And
a TV show, kind of like like basically a combination of ghost hunters and finding Bigfoot, where you have a Bigfoot researcher, a ghost hunter, and a ufologist as a team, and they're all sent to these different locations, and they all do investigations on the same subject, but from their own expertise, and
that would
see
be
what
awesome.
could be learned from that.
That's a fucking fantastic idea right there.
Yeah, just bringing it all together and bringing these ideas into one method and seeing what can be found out about this stuff through that.
I love that. I think we need to pitch that somewhere. We need to make like a demo reel
Absolutely.
and send it in somewhere. I think that's a fantastic idea. Really, I think it is. But I see the shift happening. It is starting to happen. It's starting to happen that
I'm
way.
actually interviewing two authors coming up, and they've both written books about using witchcraft to investigate the paranormal.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Chrissy something, and then J. Allen Cross. They've both written similar books, actually, about using witchcraft to investigate the paranormal. And they're both paranormal investigators and practicing witches. So I'm very excited to see what I can find out about that.
I do that. I've done that. I want to talk to them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I want to talk to them sometime. Because I've done that. Before going out on an investigation, I'll do cast certain spells and things like that, just see what happens. Again, we have a lot to talk about after the show. So
Yeah, and
that'll be
what's
cool.
funny is that I mean, I'm sure you are familiar, speaking about ufology, with John Greer.
Oh yeah,
Okay, so he has this method about contacting UFOs through meditation.
right.
And I can't speak to the validity of that. I've never tried it. I know that it's a very controversial idea, but it's interesting because I was in this woman's book about using witchcraft to investigate the paranormal. She recommends putting an audio recorder next to you, or recording on your phone audio while you're meditating, and seeing if anything comes through the recorder just based on your meditations.
That is interesting.
So different but similar.
It is. Well, I was going to talk about that. I was going to bring that up. I mean, there is a lot of talk, and I haven't done it yet personally, but there's been a lot of talk in the community lately about summoning UFOs. I mean, do you have any opinions on that? Have you dug into that much?
I have a little bit,
Yeah.
mostly through like Jack Parsons and Crowley and things like that, it is something I'm very keen to do. Going back to talking to spirits and asking, because there's spirits, and this is an interesting point. In the grimoires, you'll see the office of the spirit, and it will give you very specific attributes and abilities the spirit has. And a lot of people look at that and they kind of see it as like a vague metaphorical understanding, and I don't think it's that at all. I think it's extremely literal, and I think it's very confined. When it says, for example, we'll take Boone, who's a very, very popular spirit, and he's popular because he brings money and wealth. The thing that he does not do is foretell the future. So a lot of people think, oh, well, I can get Boone to tell me lottery numbers. No, you can't, because he can't tell the future. He can only bring you money that is available to you now. Those numbers have not been drawn yet. So he has no way of accessing those numbers. And so that's something to always keep in mind when you're looking at these kind of entities, is their actual abilities and not what you think the ability is. But there's spirits that say that they can tell you of everything terrestrial and celestial and these things. And so, Bigfoot is, whether or not it's a spirit or not, it does exist in the terrestrial sphere. UFOs exist sometimes in the terrestrial and sometimes in the celestial. So maybe these spirits can tell us what these UFOs and what these aliens really are and give us methods of contacting them.
Right, and what they're doing. Yeah, I really want to try the UFO summoning.
Yeah, you too.
I want to learn about it more first, and I just haven't had the room on the plate yet. But I'm very curious because I've got some really close friends that do it a lot, and
contact with them. I would love to cross notes.
They're actually, well, yeah, they're probably closer to you physically than they are to me.
Oh, okay, so
cool. I will definitely let you know. But yeah, and then I've got another friend she's just kind of into this stuff, but she's not really, she's not a researcher or anything. Somebody told her about it and she decided to go do it, and it fucking terrified her, and she will never do it ever again.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and I believe her. I believe that something happened. So I mean, gosh, if it's that easy, well, how easy is it? And why are we not talking about that more? Maybe I need to talk about it more. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think I need to start getting into that field as well.
Maybe that's what we'll plan when we finally meet each other. We get together. We'll summon some UFOs together.
Okay.
And we'll do like our homework. You study a little bit, I'll study a little bit. We'll bring both of our knowledge to the table.
I think that'd be very fruitful.
And we'll summon something, yeah. And make contact with UFOs. I think that would be great. I think that's a good idea. But
going back to what we've been talking about as far as people like, there's obviously an argument about woo versus, I guess we'll call it like materialist or materialist mindsets when it comes to the paranormal. And I don't think there needs to be this distinction, in the sense that we don't need to be hating each other, because we're talking to each other right now because the glory of science, the glory of engineering, the glory of materialist mindsets making these machines that we can talk to each other with. We investigate through materialist means. The thing that I would say to that is that always, keep science in mind and do your research in science, but understand that science has a ceiling, and that once you get to that ceiling, don't be afraid to break through and see what else is out there that current science is kind of poo-pooing right now. Because at one point in time, science didn't believe that gorillas existed or panda bears or things like that. And so, while I hesitate to say that the paranormal is just science that hasn't been discovered yet, there is definitely an aspect to that.
I mean, look at medical science. Just even 100 years ago, we thought we could cure everything with cocaine.
I know, and cigarettes were good for you.
Clearly we were wrong. That happens. You're right. I mean, it's just because we're at this point right now doesn't mean that whatever we have is truth. I tell people to follow physics. Physics will blow your fucking mind. It's crazy how much that changes. And what is physics? Physics is the study of fucking life. I mean, it's how everything works. Everything.
Right. Exactly.
And fucking every couple of weeks, some huge major breakthrough comes around. Maybe not every couple of weeks, but definitely every couple of months, a huge breakthrough happens. And we're like, oh shit, everything we knew about physics is wrong. And it just continues over and over again. It really shows you how faulty conventional science can be. But you should still definitely use it. I mean, I don't know. You just gotta be able to find the balance.
It's funny because in the ceremonial system, you will see things that are called rituals and ceremonies, but for the most part, you will see things called operations, and you will hear in the grimoires the magician is referred to as the operator, and it is because to do a traditional ceremonial magic system, you have to use a very scientific method. You have to um, basically use the scientific method to figure out what works and what doesn't, and you have to do it very matter of factly and very practically. And yeah, it's not nearly as spiritual and religious as I think people realize it is.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I think it's just people just not knowing that, not having the proper information and the proper resources to understand that there is something to it, and that's unfortunate. That's it's really unfortunate. But from your own personal experience, it's not like it's easy. It's not like there's a good reference guide of like, hey, look at these quick facts real quick about
Right.
this
There's
stuff.
no Grimoire 101 books anymore.
Right. And there should be.
Yeah, I mean there should be and there shouldn't be because it's very powerful information. And the thing that I say is that anyone has the physical capacity to do this work,
Yeah.
but I don't think everyone has the resolve to do it.
Just like well, let's quote Jurassic Park, just because you can doesn't mean you should, or whatever
Exactly,
the hell it was he
exactly,
said.
and you gotta do a lot of thinking and soul searching to figure out if this is something you really want. Because once you and this is true of the paranormal just as much as it is magic, once you get into this stuff, it becomes your life, and,
It
you
does.
gotta have to navigate that, and a lot of the things that you don't realize you're gonna lose from doing this, you are, and, you gotta be comfortable with that.
One thing I want people to take into account, look at people before us, before this generation, the older researchers. A lot of them go fucking nuts. They do. They kind of lose themselves in this stuff because you're right. It consumes your life, and you have to walk a very fine line because it's sad. I mean, I'll go on shows. I just did it. I don't remember what show I was on. I went on a tangent about something, and then I just kind of stopped and just started laughing. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, I sound fucking nuts. You know, and you question yourself a lot. You
Yeah,
do.
you
You're like,
do.
am I crazy? Is this actually real? Can I get some validation? And over and over again. And I'm an emotional person, and I'll cry because of the validation that I'll get. I mean, it'll just absolutely rock me. And it's not that I don't believe in those things day to day. It's just that when it's so personal, it's just happening to you. Seeing it from a different perspective is quite frankly, it's amazing. It just goes to show that you are onto something. So yeah,
I
I mean
was
that
not
is
expecting the overwhelming amount of people who listen to the show and message me or email me or anything or comment and say like, what you're doing is really important. I never thought about it this way, but now that you're talking about it, it makes so much sense. It feels really good
yeah,
because I really thought that when I started this, I was going to be alone and that I was going to be, it was going to be an uphill battle the whole way. But now I'm finding that there's a lot more of this going on. Maybe people aren't talking about it as much as I am, but it's definitely still going on. And I don't want this to be like a me thing. I want to open this up to everybody, and
yeah.
I want it to be bigger. I don't want it to be extremely niche. It's going to be because it's a niche subject, but it doesn't mean it has to be a closed practice, if you know what I mean.
Right. And people don't shouldn't fear it. They shouldn't be afraid to try it and get into it and dig into it. It's just like with anything that you take on major in your life, it's got changes with it. It's got things you got to learn to adapt to.
Right, you don't have to be a magician to do magic. That's the
No,
important thing.
absolutely not. You do it every time you blow out your birthday candles.
Right.
Every time you wish upon a star. It's the same thing. It's just you call it something different, package it differently, and make it a little more I guess little bite-sized pieces instead of just all out I'm doing magics, or
Hmm.
whatever. um so I definitely agree that people should get into it. Well, I don't want to keep you forever. I want to keep you forever, but I don't want to keep you forever if you don't mind.
I'm happy to come back on whenever you will have me.
That would be great. Where can people find you? Where can they stalk you and listen to your show and
You can
things?
find me at strangedominionspodcast.com. You can also find us at the Facebook, which is still Strange Dominions. We have Instagram, YouTube. I think the only thing we don't have is Twitter.
Okay. Well, you should get on that Twitter train. I'm
I'm
telling you.
terrified of it, but maybe.
Just like with anything that you learn, there's changes, but you learn to adapt. So,
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I'm excited. I think people are going to love this show. Definitely go check out Strange Dominions. I was on there on an episode. I mean, if anything, you're here because you like me, so go listen to that
Absolutely,
at
and
least.
that was a great episode. I got a lot of compliments for that. So anyone who wants to get into the real weird stuff of the paranormal and magic, come check out Strange Dominions.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and for everybody else, we'll see you guys back here next Wednesday.